The dust-laden wind carried the scent of desperation across Willow Creek, as Sophia Carmichael gripped the letter that had changed everything. Her trembling fingers nearly tearing the weathered paper that promised her dying father's ranch could still be saved. The year was 1878, and the western frontier had no mercy for a woman alone, especially one with nothing but determination and a week's worth of supplies to her name. Sophia's chestnut hair whipped across her face as she dismounted from the stagecoach, her boots landing on Wyoming Territory soil with a decisive thud. At 22, she had left behind the comforts of Boston society to answer her father's final plea. The ranch had been his dream, and now it would be her salvation if she could save it from the clutches of the cattle baron who had been circling it like a vulture. "Madam, you sure this is where you want to get off?" The stagecoach driver eyed her with concern as he handed down her modest trunk. "Ain't much in Willow Creek for a lady like yourself." "I'm exactly where I need to be," Sophia replied, her refined Eastern accent contrasting sharply with the rugged landscape. "My father's ranch is just north of town." The driver shook his head. "Carmichael Place. Been abandoned near 6 months now, ever since old Thomas took sick." Sophia's heart sank, but she kept her spine straight. "It's not abandoned anymore." The small town of Willow Creek sprawled before her, a collection of weathered buildings, saloons with swinging doors, and wary eyes that followed her progress down the dusty main street. She needed to secure supplies, hire help, and somehow breathe life back into a ranch she had never seen. The general store's bell jingled as Sophia entered, her practical traveling dress marking her as an outsider even before she spoke. The proprietor, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose, looked up with mild interest that quickly turned to surprise. "Can I help you, miss?" "I need supplies for the Carmichael Ranch," Sophia stated, setting her reticule on the counter with purpose. "And information on hiring ranch hands." The store fell silent. Even the two women examining fabric paused their conversation. "Carmichael Ranch." The shopkeeper's brows rose. "That place is all but dead. Been bought up by Hollister's outfit, just waiting on the paperwork." "There must be some mistake. My father, Thomas Carmichael's daughter." A deep voice interrupted from behind her. Sophia turned to face a man leaning against the doorframe, tall and imposing with eyes the color of a storm-clouded sky. His dark blonde hair fell just past his collar, and the way he carried himself spoke of years in the saddle. A weathered Stetson hung from one hand and a gun belt wrapped around his lean hips. "I am," she replied, chin tilting upward. "And you are Daniel O'Malley." He stepped fully into the store, spurs jingling softly. "I worked your father's land until there wasn't work to be had anymore." Something in his tone made Sophia bristle. "Well, Mr. O'Malley, there's work now. I've come to restore the ranch." A flicker of something petty perhaps crossed his features. "You're wasting your time, Miss Carmichael. That land's been neglected too long. Water rights disputed, cattle scattered, buildings falling apart." The challenge in his words ignited something fierce within her. Sophia met his gaze unflinchingly. "You're worth every second of my time, Mr. O'Malley, if you're half the cowhand my father claimed in his letters." Silence stretched between them, taut as a lariat. Then, unexpectedly, the corner of Daniel's mouth quirked upward. "I'll show you the ranch," he finally offered. "After that, if you still want to throw good money after bad, that's your choice." The journey to the Carmichael Ranch revealed the magnitude of Sophia's challenge. The once thriving cattle operation had deteriorated into a ghost of itself. Fences sagged where they hadn't fallen completely. The main house, a modest but once proud structure, now had shutters hanging askew and a roof that had partially collapsed in one corner. Father never mentioned it was this bad, Sophia whispered, dismounting from the rented horse. Daniel watched her carefully. Your father was proud, wouldn't want you knowing how bad things got at the end. Why did you stay? Until the end, I mean. His eyes darkened. I gave my word. Sophia walked toward the house, pushing open the front door that creaked in protest. Inside, dust covered everything, but beneath it she could see the bones of what had been a home. Her father's desk stood in one corner, papers still scattered across its surface as though he'd just stepped away for a moment. There's 600 acres, Daniel said from the doorway. Good grazing land when there's water, but Hollister's men diverted the creek last spring. Your father fought it, but he got sick, Sophia finished, and now Hollister thinks the land is his for the taking. It's how things work out here. The strong survive. She turned to face him, resolve hardening her voice. Then I shall have to be strong, Mr. O'Malley. Will you help me? Daniel studied her for a long moment. You've got 2 weeks before the bank forecloses. Even if you could find the money, you'd need hands, cattle, and a miracle to make this place profitable again. I have some savings, Sophia said, and I don't need the ranch to be profitable immediately. I just need to establish enough to hold the land. Why? Daniel asked bluntly. You're clearly not cut out for ranch life. Go back east where things are civilized. Sophia's fingers traced the edge of her father's desk. This was his dream. His letters were full of this land, its beauty, its potential. He wanted me to see it someday. Her voice caught. I never came, not once, and now I'll make it right by saving what he built. Something shifted in Daniel's expression. He removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in frustration. One condition, he finally said. You listen when I tell you something won't work. No Eastern stubbornness getting us both killed. Relief flooded through her. Agreed. I'll round up a few men who might be willing to work for promises and little else. You'd better hope that bank account of yours is deeper than it looks. They began the work the following day. Daniel had somehow convinced 3 former Carmichael Ranch hands to return Jose Mendoza, a skilled horseman, Elijah Washington, whose expertise with cattle was unmatched, and young Billy Thompson, barely 19 but eager to prove himself. First things first, Daniel announced as they gathered in the yard. We repair the roof and the north corral, then we see about getting some of those scattered cattle back. The men nodded, but Sophia noticed their skeptical glances. She was an outsider, a woman and probably, in their estimation, doomed to fail. The work was harder than anything Sophia had ever experienced. Her hands blistered, then calloused. Her muscles screamed in protest each night, only to be pushed again the following day. But she never complained, never asked for special treatment, and gradually she noticed the men's attitudes shifting. You're stronger than you look, Daniel commented one evening as they sat on the porch, the day's work finally done. The house was now weathertight, though still sparse inside. Necessity is a powerful motivator, Sophia replied, flexing her sore fingers. It's more than that. His voice had softened. You care about this place, about doing right by your father's memory. She glanced at him, surprised by the insight. I barely knew him. He left when I was 12, came out west to make his fortune. We had letters, but he talked about you, Daniel said, all the time, how smart his daughter was, how she was getting educated at some fancy school back east. He was proud. Tears stung Sophia's eyes and she blinked them away. I should have visited, even once. Daniel's hand covered hers briefly. You're here now. The next morning brought trouble in the form of Hollister himself. Victor Hollister rode onto the property with 4 men, his expensive clothes and manicured appearance at odds with the rough frontier setting. Miss Carmichael, he called out, tipping his hat with mock politeness. I'd heard rumors you were trying to resurrect this operation. Sophia emerged from the barn, wiping her hands on her apron. Daniel appeared silently at her side, his presence reassuring. "Mr. Hollister, I presume," she replied coolly. "You're trespassing on private property." Hollister smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Now, that's where you're mistaken. Your father and I had an agreement. This land is as good as mine. Strange, I've found no record of such an agreement." "Verbal contract," Hollister said smoothly. "Between gentlemen." Daniel stepped forward. "Your gentleman diverted the creek that feeds this land. That's not an agreement. That's theft." Hollister's gaze hardened as it shifted to Daniel. "O'Malley. Still playing loyal dog, I see." He turned back to Sophia. "Miss Carmichael, I'm prepared to offer you a fair price for this land." "More than fair, considering its current state." "The Carmichael Ranch is not for sale," Sophia stated firmly. "Everything has a price." Hollister's tone grew menacing. "And sometimes the cost of stubbornness is quite high." "Is that a threat, Mr. Hollister?" He smiled again. "Simply an observation. Good day, Miss Carmichael." As he turned his horse to leave, he added, "I suggest you reconsider my offer before the bank's deadline. It would be a shame to see your father's legacy sold at auction." When they'd ridden away, Sophia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "He's not bluffing," Daniel said quietly. "Hollister doesn't make idle threats." "Neither do I," Sophia replied. "We need to secure our water rights and find those cattle." The next week passed in a blur of activity. Daniel led the men to locate and drive back the scattered Carmichael herds, while Sophia rode to the neighboring properties, building alliances against Hollister's growing monopoly. She discovered that many smaller ranchers harbored resentments against the cattle baron, but had been too intimidated to act alone. "It's about the creek," Sophia explained to Daniel as they pored over maps one night. "Hollister's diversion affects not just our land, but the Harper and Martinez properties too. If we can prove he illegally altered the waterway." "You'd need the territorial court to intervene," Daniel cautioned. "That takes time we don't have." "Not if we restore the original flow ourselves," Sophia countered. "According to Martinez, the diversion isn't complicated, just logs and stones piled up to redirect the current." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Hollister would consider that an act of war. It's an act of justice. And with 3 ranches standing together, he can't retaliate against everyone." Something changed in the way Daniel looked at her, then a new respect mingled with concern. "You're not at all what I expected, Sophia Carmichael." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected warmth through her. "Is that good or bad, Mr. O'Malley?" His eyes held hers. "It's dangerous." The plan to restore the creek was set for the following night. Under cover of darkness, Daniel, Jose, Elijah, and 2 of Martinez's men would dismantle the diversion while Sophia, Billy, and the others kept watch. As they prepared to ride out, Daniel pulled Sophia aside. "If anything goes wrong, you ride straight back to town. Find Sheriff Briggs." "I'm not abandoning you or the ranch," she protested. "This isn't about your stubbornness or proving yourself," Daniel said sharply. "This is about surviving. Promise me." Something in his intensity made her nod. "I promise." The night was clear but moonless as they approached the creek diversion. The illegal dam was just as Martinez had described, crude but effective, redirecting the water away from their lands and toward Hollister's expanding empire. The men worked silently, removing the barriers piece by piece. Sophia and Billy maintained their vigil from a ridge overlooking the site, rifles ready. They were nearly finished when the sound of approaching horses reached them. Sophia gave the warning signal, 3 short whistles that cut through the night. "Riders coming," she hissed as Daniel rejoined her. "At least 6. Hollister's men, Daniel confirmed, catching sight of them in the darkness. They must have been patrolling. Everyone scatter, but it was too late. The riders had spotted them and were closing in fast. Go, Daniel urged Sophia. Remember your promise. Before she could protest, gunfire erupted. A bullet splintered the tree beside her head, and Daniel shoved her toward her horse. Go! Heart pounding, Sophia mounted and galloped away, hating herself for leaving but knowing she could best help by bringing reinforcements. Behind her, she heard more shots than shouts. She rode hard for town, praying she wouldn't be too late. Sheriff Briggs was surprisingly responsive when she burst into his office with her tale. Hollister's been pushing his luck for months, the lawman said, strapping on his gun belt. Time someone pushed back. With the sheriff and 3 deputies, Sophia returned to the creek. The scene they found was chaotic. Hollister's men had Daniel and the others cornered, but the diversion had been successfully dismantled. Water was already beginning to flow back into its natural channel. That's enough. Sheriff Briggs's authoritative voice cut through the standoff. Lower those weapons or face arrest. Hollister's foreman, a brutal-looking man named Stark, sneered. These trespassers were destroying private property. This waterway is territorial land, the sheriff countered. Any diversion without proper permits is illegal. He turned to Daniel. Everyone all right? Daniel nodded, though Sophia could see blood on his sleeve. Just a graze. The sheriff ordered Hollister's men to disperse, warning them that any further interference with the creek would result in charges. Reluctantly, they rode off, Stark's parting glare promising this wasn't over. As they returned to the Carmichael ranch, dawn was breaking over the horizon. Daniel rode beside Sophia, his expression troubled. You shouldn't have come back, he said quietly. Hollister won't forget this. I made a promise to get help, not to abandon you, Sophia replied. There's a difference. At the ranch, she insisted on tending Daniel's wound herself. As she cleaned and bandaged his arm, their proximity awakened feelings she had been trying to ignore. You could have been killed, she murmured. Worried about finding another foreman, he asked, his attempt at humor falling flat. Sophia's hands stilled. Worried about losing someone I've come to. She hesitated, then finished honestly. Care about. Daniel's eyes searched hers. Sophia, whatever you think you're feeling, don't tell me what I feel, she interrupted. I may be new to ranch life, but I know my own heart. He stood abruptly, putting distance between them. This can't happen. You're the ranch owner. I work for you. Is that the only reason? She challenged. Daniel ran a hand through his hair in frustration. You have a life waiting back east. Once the ranch is stable, you'll go back to it. You don't know that. I know your type, he said harshly. Adventure in the West makes for good stories at Boston tea parties. The unfairness of his words stung. You don't know me at all if that's what you think. Before he could respond, Billy burst into the house. Riders coming. Looks like Hollister himself. The confrontation with Victor Hollister was inevitable, but Sophia hadn't expected it so soon. The cattle baron dismounted in the yard, this time accompanied by a man in a suit whom she recognized as the bank manager, Mr. Peterson. Miss Carmichael, Hollister began without preamble. Your actions last night were foolhardy and illegal. The only illegality was your diversion of a public waterway, Sophia replied calmly. The territorial court will confirm that. Perhaps. Hollister's smile was cold, but courts move slowly and banks do not. He gestured to Peterson. I believe your deadline for repayment is tomorrow. The bank manager looked uncomfortable but nodded. The terms of your father's loan are clear, Miss Carmichael. Full payment is due or the property will be auctioned. Daniel stepped forward. We've restored the herd. The ranch has value now. Not enough, Peterson said regretfully. The outstanding amount is considerable. Sophia felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. She had used nearly all her savings on supplies and wages. The remaining amount wouldn't cover half the debt. "How convenient that you'll be there to purchase it at auction," she said to Hollister. The cattle baron shrugged. "Business, Miss Carmichael, nothing personal." After they departed, Sophia sank onto the porch steps, the weight of defeat pressing down on her. Daniel sat beside her, his usual stoicism replaced by genuine concern. "There must be something we can do," he said. "Unless you have $3,000 hidden in your saddlebags, I don't see how," Sophia replied bitterly. Daniel was silent for a long moment. "Then maybe I do." Sophia looked up sharply. "What? Not in my saddlebags," he clarified, "but I might know where to find it." He stood, determination in every line of his body. "I need to ride to Silver Springs. If I leave now, I can make it back by tomorrow afternoon." "Daniel, what are you?" "Trust me," he said, his hand briefly touching her cheek. "Just this once, trust me." Before she could question him further, he was striding toward the stables. The hours of Daniel's absence were the longest of Sophia's life. She continued working, directing the men as they repaired fences and tended the cattle. But her thoughts were constantly with the mysterious cowboy who had become so essential to her plans and to her heart. By noon the next day, there was still no sign of him. Peterson arrived from the bank, his expression regretful but determined. "I'm sorry, Miss Carmichael, but I must insist on payment in full." Sophia stood on the porch, her posture rigid with pride. "Mr. Peterson, surely we can come to some arrangement. The ranch is productive again." "The cattle, the terms were set by your father," he interrupted gently. "I have no authority to alter them." As they argued, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew their attention. Daniel rode into the yard, his horse lathered from hard riding, another man following close behind. "Wait!" Daniel called out, dismounting in a cloud of dust. "We have the money." Sophia stared in disbelief as Daniel approached with a leather pouch. The stranger who had accompanied him hung back, a distinguished-looking man in his 50s with silver at his temples. $3,000, Daniel announced, handing the pouch to Peterson. "Count it if you like." The banker looked astonished but did as suggested, carefully counting out the bills and notes. "This appears to be in order," he finally admitted. "I'll prepare a receipt immediately." When Peterson had gone to his saddlebags for the necessary paperwork, Sophia turned questioning eyes to Daniel. "How did you—" "Allow me to introduce Judge Harrison Wells," Daniel said, gesturing to the older man, who stepped forward with a courteous nod. "Your father's oldest friend." The judge smiled warmly. "And executor of his will. Your father was wiser than you know, Miss Carmichael. He left funds in my care, to be released only if you demonstrated true commitment to the ranch." "I don't understand," Sophia said, bewildered. "Thomas knew the ranch might face hard times," Judge Wells explained. "He also knew his daughter might come to claim her inheritance out of duty rather than desire. He wanted to be sure you truly valued the land before investing everything in it." "So the deadline, the threat of losing everything, all real," Daniel assured her. "But your father had a contingency plan. Judge Wells has been monitoring your progress through me." Realization dawned. "You've been reporting on me, testing me." Daniel had the grace to look uncomfortable. "At first, yes, but not for long." His eyes met hers. "I saw your determination, your passion for this land. It became real for me too." After the judge and Peterson departed, Sophia confronted Daniel in the privacy of the ranch house. "You let me believe we were about to lose everything," she accused, her emotions a turbulent mix of relief and betrayal. "I had to be sure," Daniel replied. "Sure that you weren't just here out of obligation, that you truly wanted this life." "And now, are you sure?" His eyes softened. I've been sure since the night you came back with the sheriff instead of running to safety. You're not just playing at being a rancher, Sophia. You are one." The distance between them suddenly seemed unbearable. Sophia stepped closer. "What about the other reasons you gave?" "For why this," she gestured between them, "couldn't happen. I was afraid," Daniel admitted quietly. "Afraid you'd realize this life is too hard, too dangerous, that you'd leave." "I'm not leaving," Sophia whispered. "This is my home now." Daniel's hand came up to cup her cheek. "I told you that you were wasting your time with this ranch, with me." Sophia smiled, leaning into his touch. "And I told you that you're worth every second." Their first kiss was tender, a promise exchanged without words. When they finally parted, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Sophia Carmichael. God help me, I tried not to." She laughed softly. "I'm rather glad you failed, Daniel O'Malley." The seasons changed, and with them, the Carmichael ranch transformed. The restored creek brought life back to the land, and the cattle herd grew. Hollister made one final attempt to drive them out a midnight attack that was repelled by the combined forces of the Carmichael, Martinez, and Harper ranches. Facing unified resistance and legal scrutiny from Judge Wells, the cattle baron finally retreated to focus on his legitimate holdings. On a crisp autumn day in 1879, Sophia stood on the porch of the newly expanded ranch house, watching as Daniel worked with a spirited colt in the corral. She still marveled sometimes at how completely her life had changed in a single year. "Admiring the view," Daniel called out, catching her gaze. He released the colt and strode toward her, dust clinging to his clothes but his smile as bright as the Wyoming sky. "Always," she replied with a smile of her own. He climbed the steps and pulled her into his arms, no longer hesitant about showing affection. Their marriage 3 months earlier had been a community celebration, with even Sheriff Briggs delivering a toast to the couple who had helped break Hollister's iron grip on the territory. "I just got word from town," Daniel said. "The water rights bill passed. No one can divert natural waterways without territorial approval now." Sophia's eyes lit up. "That's wonderful news. Father would be proud." "He'd be prouder of you," Daniel said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I know I am." As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, casting golden light across the prosperous ranch, Sophia leaned into her husband's embrace. The journey had been harder than she could have imagined, filled with dangers and setbacks that would have broken a lesser spirit. But looking at what they had built together, a home, a thriving business, a love that deepened with each passing day, she knew without doubt that every challenge had been worth it. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked softly. Sophia smiled up at him, her heart full. "I'm thinking that sometime investments pay extraordinary dividends, Mr. O'Malley." His answering kiss was all the confirmation she needed that he agreed. They had both found a fortune greater than gold in the wild hills of Wyoming, and neither would trade it for all the comfort and security of the world they'd left behind.